Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books with me, Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about all of life through the prism of food. And this week, in the 4th in our series on matrescence, I'm with Emiko Davies, the Australian-born, half-Japanese writer on Italian food, who lives with her family in Florence, to talk about Japan.
To me, it's the thing I look forward to the most, coming home and, well, obviously seeing my parents and giving them a hug and then going home and having sukiyaki.
Gohan is the Japanese word for rice, but it also means family meal. And for Emiko, it was the only word to use as the title for her very first book on the food of her childhood.
That's right. I think rice is for me that bowl of just cooked, warm, steamed rice. My mum would do it out of a rice cooker, so it would come fresh out of the rice cooker. It'd be the perfect temperature, the perfect consistency. That little bowl of rice, that for me is Gohan, and it means home cooking. It means sitting around the table with your family. It's the word that you call out when dinner's ready. You say Gohan, and that means dinner's ready. It's the rice, and it's really specifically that little bowl of freshly steamed rice.
And this is a book about so much more. It's quite a seminal book on Japanese food, which is strange because the reason that I've chosen you for this matrescence series is because I want to talk about identity and how you pass that on. You were brought up in Australia, you have a Japanese mother, an Australian father, and you live in Italy and you write about Italian food culture. That's how we know you. You have 2 little girls who live with you in Italy, and you talk to your mum Sumi all the time about everything, and you're constantly just swapping recipes with her. Then that little bowl of rice actually represents something quite different to me. It represents a question about who you are as a mother.
I feel like now I think I know who I am as a mother. Maybe it changes. I feel like that goes through phases. I have a 5-year-old and a 10, nearly 11-year-old who seems like she's going on directly to 17 or 18 years old right now. We're going through a really, I can see where like my whole world is about to change upside down, probably even more than when she was a newborn. I would say that after, 10 years of becoming a mother, I feel like I know, who I am now as a mother and what how I feel.
In a sense, you're in the land of the mothers, aren't you? I mean, if you can't be a mother in Italy, I'm not sure where you learn to be a mother. But I'm interested in the kind of it's not even a conflict. I'm interested in the kind of the juxtaposition of the Japanese with the Australian with the Italian. We don't think about how to mother. We just muddle on through and, we may learn from our mistakes. But is there a sense of actually, what kind of mother am I? Am I an Italian mother? How do you find yourself mothering? Do you find yourself mothering like your Japanese mother mothered you? Your grandmother mothered her? Or like the nonnas around you, the mothers around you?
That's a really interesting question. I'm definitely the black sheep. I would say.
But where? The black sheep in Italy, the black sheep Australia, where?
Everywhere. I feel like just a black sheep. I definitely do not mother like Italian mothers. That is for sure. It's actually I'm quite surprised at what a cultural difference there is, I think, around mothering in Italy. It's something that took me by surprise, and I definitely don't exactly even mother the way my mother did either. I think I've just developed my own way.
Tell us a little bit about that. That's intriguing. How do Italians mother in your perception?
Well, Yeah, there's a lot of, Italians worry so much about things like the weather and getting cold in particular, or being wet and cold. And that combination is particularly deadly. So being wet in the sense you could, wet hair, that's an absolute no. But for example, even just running around the playground and you get a little sweaty because it's hot. It's very, very, very hot here. I'm sitting in the dark with my shutters closed because it's so hot. Yeah, and if you run around like kids run around at the playground, and then they get a little bit sweaty, especially at the back of their neck, you see these parents rushing around telling their children to stop running around, you're going to get sweaty, or their solution is just to wrap a scarf around their necks so that they don't then get cold. And I'm like, the point of getting sweaty is to then cool down. So, that's a kind of a natural process. But there is so much of this sort of, this thing that's been transmitted from grandmother to mother in Italy. And it just defies all logic and science, and people get really, really worried about certain things that they've been told over and over and over again by their nonnas and their mamas. And so, don't have the window open in the car. You'll get hit by cold air. You'll get really sick, and don't go outside because you'll be sick, and all the kids are rugged up when it's hot. It's just, I think, my kids are the black sheep as well in the community.
Well, at least you've got something to kind of be an antithesis to. Sometimes when things you just, particularly mothering or, whatever you see, suddenly you think, actually, that's really how I don't want to be. And very often that is how you were mothered. I mean, when you remember your mothering from your mother, Sumi, who appears a lot in this book, as does your grandmother, your Obachan, there are very clear hand-me-downs in terms of manners and culture and food and recipes and wisdom. Do you find yourself remembering that? I mean, I feel like my mother's constantly on my shoulder, kind of, reminding me how to be, and certainly was when my children were little. Do you feel that?
Absolutely. I think for me, those moments are really heightened at the table, and I think that must just be because for me, that's where a lot of my memories are, surrounded by food and certain smells. I can always hear something that my mum has said, something is usually related to food. Like, for example, speaking of it being hot and it's summer, she would say something that her mother would say to her, which, when it's hot and you're feeling tired, eat some pickles. And that's like the perfect pick me up. And I always do that. I feel that when I'm feeling just a little tired, I go to the fridge and I get some pickles, and I'm thinking, I don't know what that might be one of these things that was just passed on down without any logic or any sense. But for me, that's kind of a comfort. I feel like, that's something Mum told me I should do, and that feels right,
Yeah. And you write a lot about what your mother and your grandmother taught you to do, particularly around meal times. I was very taken by the phrase itadakimasu. And I know this, I've heard it a million times, of course, but I didn't know what it meant. And as mothers, we are particularly kind of holders of cultural traditions and family traditions. And itadakimasu will explain what it means and why it's so important to pass on a whole world of values in that one word.
Itadakimasu is something you say at the beginning of a meal, and I've seen it sometimes being translated as like bon appetit, but it's not, or buon appetito in Italian. It's not just enjoy this meal. It's really more thank you to the person who cooked the meal. So whether you're at home or whether you're at a restaurant, it's a really nice thing to say, or you're at a friend's place, you say itadakimasu before the meal. And it's not just even thank you to the person who cooked it. It's saying thanks to the farmers who grew, the grains of rice or the vegetables that you're eating. It goes back to saying thank you to the people who brought those grains of rice to the market, the person who went to the market to buy them. It's all of those. And when you stop for a moment to think about that and think about how many hands, those grains of rice, just to speak of one simple dish that might be on the table, let alone, all the other ingredients on the table. But when you think about how many hands it went through to get that dish on your table. It's really quite an amazing thing. Just that one simple phrase that you can say, just a little bit of gratitude for that dish. I think it's a really wonderful, really nice thing.
I love it. And I love the fact that you say it was born of Buddhism. And it means bow. It's that wonderful yogic bow where you put your hands together in prayer position behind your head. And you bring it up, don't you? So it's the mountain.
It's a mountain above your head.
And then you bow with it. And people do bow in Japan, don't they,
yes.
to the food.
Yes.
So it is a reminder of how much food means for absolutely everyone around you and the planet and everything. I think it's particularly timely for now. When you write about Mario, your daughter's recipe for soup, I wonder if that itadakimasu is integral to the ingredients that she wrote or she drew. It was before she could actually write, and she drew all the ingredients, including a heart. And I wondered if the spirit of itadakimasu had kind of penetrated her consciousness by that time. What do you think?
Well, I think I've always sort of taught both of my kids that food is made with love. When we cook food at home, we're making it with love for each other. I'm making something with love for them, or they're cooking for us, or there's always something of yourself involved in a dish when you feed it to somebody else. And so she was very little. I think she must have been 4 or 5. This is before she could write, when she drew out these ingredients for her soup recipe. But she knew that that's part of it, that love goes into it. And I think that it definitely is tied to itadakimasu, saying this idea of the gratitude and the effort that has gone into a meal. Love is part of that effort.
It really is. It takes us very neatly into your first food moment as well. It's called Welcome Home Sukiyaki. Tell us why you chose this one of the many recipes in your book.
So this recipe for me, I was really adamant. I had an editor who wanted me to not just to sort of call it sukiyaki, or actually she wanted to call it just a beef hot pot. And I was like, no. I really want it to be called Welcome Home Sukiyaki, because to me that's what that dish is a symbol of. It's one of my favorite dishes, and it's a dish that my mum would often make when I would come home. So that's why it was like the welcome home meal. I've basically been living away on the opposite hemisphere from where my parents live since I was 17. And, I went to university in America, and I've been living in Italy now for nearly 20 years. So whenever I come home, this is like the first thing mum cooks. And to me, it's the thing I look forward to the most of, coming home and, well, obviously seeing my parents and giving them a hug, and then going home and having sukiyaki. And it's a wonderful dish, I think, for that occasion, or for any sort of gathering really, but because you have the pot in the middle of the table. My mum has this Japanese gas burner that you pop on the table, and you can put the pot right on it, and she makes this special sauce that goes in there, and then there's just a platter of ingredients. And she sits down, and this is what I love about it, because the cook actually sits there with you, and everybody cooks the dish together. So you have, cabbage and carrots, mushrooms, daikon, whatever you want. There's usually some really thinly sliced beef, some noodles. They all go into the pot, and then you fish them out again. And everybody eats at their own pace, and they eat the bits that they like. My favorite bit is the tofu. The tofu soaks up the sauce in an incredible way. So that's my favorite bit. I'm very greedy for that one. And it's wonderful because you get to, it's a really nice, I think, family meal as well, because everybody has different preferences. And, I just like the idea that you can just eat the bits that you love best, and we're all there together, cooking it together, and mum's there. She doesn't have to be standing up in the kitchen cooking. She's there so I can catch up with her, and I look forward to it every time.
Yeah. It's a lovely sort of little snapshot of a family meal. Your second food moment reminds me of Italy, actually. You say dessert in a Japanese meal is more often than not a piece of fresh fruit, and it's always seasonal. There's a real focus on seasonality in the way that you describe Japanese food culture. as it is, obviously, as we know, in Italy. Tell us about that food moment, and tell us about how that makes you connect, perhaps, with Italian food culture.
Well, I always thought that I learnt about seasonality living in Italy, which I moved here in my early 20s. And when I started writing this book, I was thinking back to all of my top food memories of Japan and visiting my grandparents in Japan. We would visit really all different seasons all year long. My mum tried to avoid summer because it's so hot and humid in Japan, but I did spend a summer in Japan as well when I was about 12. And my memories of almost all of the trips and the meals are punctuated by the fruit that we ate at the end of the meal. One of the things about fruit in Japan, for me, still, even now, I just think it's the fruitiest fruit I've ever tasted. And I think partly it's because Japan has such an incredible, fertile volcanic soil, that the fruit that grows in Japan is just, similar to Italy. Italy also has incredibly fertile volcanic soil, and the fruit that's grown here as well is wonderful. It just tastes so different to the fruit that I've had in Australia. But in Japan, there's this other sort of sense of seasonality, and now I realize this is all where I learned about seasonality was actually in Japan growing up. But rather than just 4 seasons, in Japan you have micro seasons as well. So there are actually 72 seasons in Japan, and that for me it really shows how in Japan the idea of peak season doesn't just mean summer. It means like a very specific week in summer. Like this is the best, 2 weeks maybe to eat this one thing. And not just fruit or produce, but also fish. There are all kinds of things that have, their peak season in Japan, and that is really respected when it comes to eating and tasting food in Japan.
You skips from that sort of Japanese food moment back to Australia. Again, I'm very interested in how we become who we are. And your third food moment is matcha almond cookies. And it's a story of best friends and you witnessing your mother making cookies with her best friend, Haruko. Tell us about that.
Well, those cookies, I actually helped my mum make these cookies one year. This is a particularly strong memory for me because Haruko was my mother's best friend. She was like an aunt to me. Her daughter is my exact same age, half Japanese, half Australian. Lives in London actually with her 2 kids who are the same age as my 2, similar age to my 2 kids, and Haruko would make these amazing cookie tins every Christmas with just the most beautifully made little cookies, every single one of them different types of cookies, different flavors, different colors, different shapes. They were absolutely beautiful, and very, very just beautifully done, as if it's come out of a wonderful pastry shop. But she would make these herself, and she was very sick with cancer, and had started her Christmas cookie tins actually well in advance. She was very organized. She had some of the cookie doughs already in the freezer. She had things already prepared, and she had her notes. But she was too ill to finish them, and she asked my mum if she could finish making the cookies. And so my mum gathered all of her notes together, and she had little drawings, of what the cookies should look like, and these little shapes and things. It was just amazing. I wish I had thought about, keeping some kind of a record of these notes and the recipes with the drawings and things. But I do remember these matcha almond cookies in particular. There were lots of them, and we helped, and I helped. We made all of these cookie tins. We were staying up till late at night trying to get all the cookies finished. And the one that really stands out to me with these matcha almond cookies, because I just have this weakness for matcha, anything really, and it's nice. I love this is a cookie that I make often, and I think of Haruko every time I make them, and I I remember that night my mum and I were making cookies till the middle of the night for her. It was really special.
Yeah, sounds really special. And do you make them with your own children now?
Yeah, they're not keen on the matcha though, so I have to do a batch without the matcha. And but they love it. They love it too. They're two little artists. For them, making Christmas cookies in particular, is like a amazing craft project. They're both really into it.
Because that is what cooking is. And certainly you talk a lot in the book about the rituals of Japanese cooking. It's very much about laying down memories. It's about laying down sense of who you are, identity through, living memories. And then something that you all share together around the table. It's absolutely delightful. Your fourth food moment is grilled mochi and cheese snack. These chewy rice cakes. Tell me why you wanted to choose this. I mean, because there were so many different recipes in the book. It's always hard, isn't it, to choose four? But there's always a specific reason. Tell me why you chose this one.
So, I think most people think of mochi as something sweet and very soft. And this is a completely different kind of mochi. And I think maybe people don't know about it, but this is a mochi that you find dried, and it's a pantry item. You store it in the pantry. It's like a little rectangular block, and when you open it, it comes usually in a package of 4. You open one at a time. It looks like something made of plastic, like it's something absolutely inedible. But you grill it. You just put it on a dry, really hot pan. And it'll start to sort of puff up, and it'll get sort of crispy on the outside. It'll get like, a bit golden brown, or, darker than that if you leave it longer. And inside becomes incredibly soft and chewy, and the outside stays a little bit crunchy. And it takes just a couple of minutes to cook. You flip it around, so it's got, cook it on both sides. And then you dip it in soy sauce. And this is another thing. I think people think of mochi as only exclusively a sweet dish, but it's definitely not. You find it in soups. You could have this in a miso soup. You could have this in a broth. And you can break it into little pieces as well. So you've got like these little sort of little chewy rice bits, in your soup. Anyway, this one is just a snack, and it's just a gorgeous snack that I make when I don't know what to eat, but I'm feeling a bit hungry, or when I'm tired and I don't have time to make anything, I can just pull this out of the pantry. So you dip it in soy sauce. My family, as in my mum and my sister, my uncle in Japan does this. We put a slice of cheese on it, which is very unusual. I think it's very sort of un-Japanese addition to a Japanese dish, but the cheese works. It's very good. You put the cheese on it while it's still very hot, and mochi stays hot for a really, really long time. So actually, you got to be careful when you bite into it, because if you take too big a bite and you've got this piping hot sticky rice thing in your mouth, it's dangerous. You put the cheese on top and it'll melt a little bit, and then you wrap the whole thing in a piece of nori, in dried seaweed, that I usually cut to like the size. You wrap it up, and it's the most wonderful little snack. I love it so much, and for me, this just hits that nostalgia spot so well. And
yeah, it takes you right back there, doesn't it? I mean, you can see it in your face as you're remembering. You're right back there. But are you back in Japan eating it with your mother and your sister?
I'm at home at my mum's house in Australia. No. I think that this is one of the things she always brought back from Japan with her, and she would always prepare for us as snacks. As kids, but also as teenagers, and then as adults. This is still our favourite snack ever. It's just delicious.
Because home is where the mum is, isn't it, really?
Yes.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? And, I wanted to kind of finish by asking you, it was actually in the acknowledgements that I read about your imposter syndrome. And I do a lot of food writing retreats. And, you know, the imposters come through the door and they sit around the table and we talk about all their imposters until their imposters get too tired and, you know,
and leave.
Give up. Exactly. You tried to sell this book to your previous publisher and it wasn't taken up. It took some time to get it away, and you felt a bit like an imposter because you're not Japanese. You're half Japanese, but you grew up in Australia and you live in Italy. How did you manage to reconcile that imposter syndrome?
Having the book turned down by my publisher, who I'd already published several books with, was a really it was a really big blow to my confidence. It made me feel like I didn't have the authority to write a book about the food that I actually grew up with, because one of the responses I got was, well, we already have some, you know, writers who write about Japanese food. These are writers who have no Japanese heritage at all. But at the time I thought, well, I'm writing about this from the point of view of, this is my family food. This is home cooking. It's like chef food or something you find in a restaurant. This is, you know, something that has stories with it as well. But, having that rejected, that made me feel, I wasn't Japanese enough. I didn't have the authority to write a book like that because I had also already been writing about Italian cuisine, and sort of established myself as an Italian food writer. I had a lot of questions going on in my mind about that.
But that's great, isn't it? Because sometimes, and what I say to people, all the imposters sitting around the table is, you know, let's get the imposters out and let's have a look at them. And what do they really look like? And actually, they look like the real deal. What was the process that got you from imposter to recognizing that actually you really did have something to say here?
Probably mostly stubbornness, I think, was the main thing that pushed me through. I became more than determined than ever to somehow tell this story. I sat on it for a while. I sat on it for a couple of years over COVID and sort of waiting and wondering, and actually as time went on, I knew more and more that this is what I wanted to write about. I ended up writing another book in the meantime, and one of the things I sort of came to realize is that all of my sort of food memories, all of my nostalgic food memories, and all of my favorite foods and all of my favorite flavors and all of the things that I'm drawn to in food are actually, I think they are actually Japanese food. If someone said to me, you can only eat Japanese rice or pasta for the rest of your life, and there would be no competition for me. It's Japanese rice forever and ever. I just think that this is the food I was programmed to eat. I was my mother's firstborn child. I don't know if she was eating a lot of Japanese food when I was pregnant. I should ask her about that actually. But I feel like it's in my DNA. It's in my, it feels like it's in my blood. And I may not be fluent, you know, in Japanese. I can understand it pretty well, but I don't speak it very well. And that was another thing that made me feel like an imposter, is not being able to speak Japanese. But I feel like I am definitely fluent in Japanese food. This is my love language, and this is the food that I know, and the food that I love, and I would want to eat for the rest of my life. There's just no other. I love Italian food too, but there's just no competition for me. My heart is really with Japanese food, and that's some of what brought me back to I can do this. And it wasn't until I was cooking a lot of these recipes and writing down the recipes in order to start writing this book again that this sort of came to me.
Yeah. Tara Wigley, actually, she uses that term love language when she's talking about her disappointment, let's call it, when her children, when asked what's their favourite meal, chose the nanny's lasagna.
Oh no.
She was mortified. What would your children say was their favourite meal? Would it be Japanese or would it be Italian?
One of them, for sure, the little one, she's a ramen and rice girl. She's got the same taste as me. Those are her two most requested things. She loves this rice dish that I have in the book called tamago no gohan, and that would have been one of the other food memories if I could have had more space to add another one. But it's an egg and rice dish that again, this is one of the things I usually make. In fact, all the dishes I make when I'm tired are Japanese dishes. But when I'm tired, when the kids are hungry and I need something just really, really quick, or I don't have anything really in the fridge, I make this rice dish, and it's just a beaten egg with some soy sauce that you sort of half scramble in a pan, and then you add some cooked rice, because whenever I have leftover rice, I put it in the freezer and then I can just take it out. You add the cooked rice, you fry it together, and you put it in a bowl. That's it. It takes like 3 minutes max, maybe even less. And it's wonderful. And it's a dish that my mum used to make me when I was sick, or just also probably when she was tired. So that's the one dish I make for my kids. At least once a week we end up with one of those. But it's also my little one's most requested, next to ramen, or some sort of noodles with soup, sometimes somen or udon noodles, in some kind of a broth. And I usually do like a dashi broth with some soy sauce, or sometimes I'll put miso in it, but it's usually pretty simple. The other one, I think her go-to would be like the Italian equivalent of that, which is like pasta in bianco. That's like where you have a very plain pasta with just Parmesan cheese and olive oil. That would be her comfort dish, and her sort of most requested. So I've got one Italian and one Japanese.
Thanks for listening, and do check out my Substack for a lovely chat between Emiko and her daughter in Extra Bites. See you next week.